I have an illustration of how thinking should work. It's an analogy between how we think and a courtroom with a judge, lawyers, and a jury. In this analogy, the imaginary courtroom in our mind has a judge who keeps order, admits facts and evidence, makes judgments and forms opinions. It has the prosecutor and defender arguing for one side or another in a case. And it has a jury that deliberates over facts and evidence in order to come to a consensus. In this analogy, each one of these characters is you playing a particular role in the thinking process. You, the judge, you, the lawyers, and you, the jury. The real-world courtroom I'm basing this on is most like a criminal trial court. But in the courtroom of your mind, rather than accusers and accused, or plaintiffs and defendants, it's ideas that are on trial. The reason the courtroom process is so closely analogous to the process of thinking is that they're both a method for careful consideration of evidence, facts and logic, and various competing arguments, all with the purpose of getting at the truth. The accused in the courtroom is guaranteed due process of law, and the ideas in the courtroom of your mind should also be given due process of reason. To judge properly in a court of law is to uphold truth, justice, fairness, and all of the values and principles of our civilization. And so good thinking also upholds your set of personal values and principles, such as they are. The drama of the courtroom lies in the fact that its purpose is to get at the truth through reason, so that justice may be served to the best of our ability and beyond a reasonable doubt. And here comes the kicker. In both the pursuit of justice in the courtroom and the pursuit of truth in our minds, we're hindered at every turn by human foibles like bias, selective memory, self-deception, and all manner of character flaws and personality quirks. We all have them. We're hindered by the human condition, and the human condition is your condition. So that's what you're up against in the courtroom of your mind. When I watch crime shows and courtroom dramas, which I do a lot, I often think all of this drama, all of this expense of the police, the forensics labs, the public salaries, and the whole legal system, it could all be avoided if the culprit just told the truth and admitted to his crime. But a massive criminal justice system exists, mainly for the reason that people lie. Meanwhile, a very similar drama takes place in your mind when it comes to thinking. But instead of lying to the court, the main problem in the courtroom of your mind is lying to yourself. The real-life courtroom is supposed to be a place where a serious attempt to achieve the ideals of truth and justice takes place, as it should be in the courtroom of your mind. The judgments made in the courtroom are supposed to be arrived at by a meticulous process with the highest ideals in mind. So, by analogy, your judgments, your opinions and beliefs, if they are to be the best they can be, should also be arrived at by a meticulous process with the highest ideals in mind. So, when it comes to how to think, the first question to ask yourself is, how much work are you really willing to put into it? Because it isn't a quick and easy process. It requires time and effort. All right, let's go over the roles and duties of the judge, the lawyers, and the jury, and how these are analogous to the process of good thinking. Let's say the judge has two basic duties. First, to maintain order, and second, to decide what can be admitted as evidence in the trial. To maintain order, the judge bangs the gavel and says, "Order in the court," which is to say, stop the distractions and focus on the case. The judge is in charge. It's his courtroom. And likewise, in order to think, you, the judge in the courtroom of your mind, must also keep yourself focused on the task at hand. And this should involve some gavel banging and disciplining of yourself. The courtroom of ideas requires an orderly process which calls for careful consideration of facts and how evidence supports facts, which leads us to the judge's second duty. The judge decides whether something can be admitted as evidence, such that we may assume it establishes a fact. The judge should have rigorous standards of proof. For example, in a criminal trial, the judge has to decide whether the prosecution is presenting sufficient evidence that the accused was indeed at the scene of the crime. Is it a fact he was there? The prosecution calls a witness who gives testimony, claiming he heard it from someone else who saw the defendant at the scene of the crime. Then the defense attorney quickly chimes in, "That's hearsay, Your Honor." And the wise judge says, "Objection sustained." Why? Because whether or not the defendant was at the crime scene is not supported by the so-called evidence of the witness. And you, the judge in the courtroom of your mind, must decide what evidence is admissible so that you, the jury in the courtroom of your mind, can render a verdict based on what the facts of the case are. So the judge says the jury will disregard that statement. It's not admissible, in his judgment, as evidence to support a fact. Now, let's turn to the lawyers, or attorneys, or counselors in the courtroom of your mind. Let's say you, the prosecution, present the idea, or case, if you will, that there is less snow nowadays than there was when you were a kid. You claim this is a fact, and you call your first witness to the stand, who is also you. And you, the witness, say that you definitely feel like the snow was deeper when you were little. And what's more, you say that lots of your friends feel the same way too. Now, are you, the defense lawyer, going to let that stand? Or are you going to object that this so-called evidence is based on vague memories and feelings? Does the evidence presented establish the fact? No. No, it doesn't. So you, the defense, should object. And you, the judge, should sustain that objection. Because you, the prosecution, bringing this case of diminishing snowfall, will have to bring in some better evidence, such as 50 or 60 years of snowfall records. So, look, we see already that the role of the lawyers, as it applies to thinking, is to ensure that ideas don't get idly passed along as vague beliefs without due process of reason. Just the mere presence of an opposing point of view in your mind is enough to improve your reasoning by 100%. With only one lawyer, there's only one point of view. And that raises a key point. The prosecution and defense are not there to have their minds changed. They're there to persuade the jury to pick a side. So what role do you, the jury, play in the courtroom of your mind? The jury represents everything you have heard, seen, read, and experienced. The jury represents all of your prior knowledge. So what makes a good jury? It would be a group with the widest, most diverse knowledge. It wouldn't be a group of people all with the same narrow opinion, all from the same background. It would represent true viewpoint diversity. And how do you get that? Well, by learning, of course, and by reading widely, and by living a life of varied experience. And now the judge orders the jury into a room to deliberate over the question as to whether there was more snowfall when you were a kid. You raise all kinds of questions in your deliberation, such as, what region are we talking about here? Your town, your state, the Northeast, the world? Are we talking about the depth of snow relative to your size as a kid or your size as an adult? Are we talking about accumulations per snowfall event or accumulations of snow per season? It turns out that no one among the 12 of you has the facts you need to reach a verdict. And that's a good thing, because you were wise enough to know that you don't know. For, as it has been said, it takes considerable knowledge to understand the depth of your ignorance. And so, the jury's verdict is, Your Honor, we can't render a verdict at this time, because no one in the jury has any real data on snowfall. There are no climate experts here. And in fact, no one has ever even read a book about anything climate related. So then, it's a hung jury, and the judge must declare a mistrial. And that's a good thing. It's the best outcome of the trial, because you, the judge, refused to project a pretense of knowledge. And you, the thinker, have chosen intellectual honesty.